Air New Zealand Flight 901. Air New Zealand Flight 901 was a McDonnell Douglas DC-10 aircraft that left Auckland on November 28, 1979. The flight wasn't just a regular commercial trip. It was a sightseeing tour designed to give passengers an unforgettable view of Antarctica. The plan was to fly over McMurdo Sound, let people take in the icy scenery from above, and then return to New Zealand after a brief stop in Christchurch. On board were 237 passengers and 20 crew members, all expecting a scenic, once-in-a-lifetime journey. Tragically, the trip ended in disaster. As the plane flew toward Antarctica, the pilots believed they were heading over open water. But in reality, due to a last-minute change in the flight's coordinates that they hadn't been told about, they were flying straight toward Mount Erebus, a massive, snow-covered volcano that rises over 12,400 feet high. The weather conditions caused what's called a whiteout, where the ground and the sky blend together. The mountain was hidden from view and it looked like flat terrain from the cockpit. The pilots descended to about 1,500 feet, thinking they were giving passengers a better view of the landscape, but they didn't realize they were flying directly toward the mountain. Just moments before the crash, the warning system sounded, but it was too late. The plane slammed into the side of Mount Erebus, killing everyone on board. At first, officials blamed the pilots for the crash, saying they flew too low. But a deeper investigation by a royal commission found that the airline had changed the flight path the night before and never told the crew. The lead investigator accused Air New Zealand of covering up the truth and called it an orchestrated litany of lies. Antarctica PBM Mariner. In late December 1946, a U.S. Navy PBM-5 Mariner seaplane named George I was flying over Antarctica as part of Operation High Jump. The aircraft was designed for long-distance patrol and could take off and land on water. Its mission was to take aerial photographs and help map unexplored parts of the continent. Operation High Jump was a major U.S. expedition to learn more about Antarctica and show America's presence in the region during the early years of the Cold War. On December 30th, the crew was flying over Thurston Island when they ran into severe weather. A blizzard had reduced visibility, and the crew couldn't tell how close they were to the ground. Their altimeters, which measure height using air pressure, gave incorrect readings because of the extreme cold and terrain. The crew thought they were flying higher than they really were. Suddenly, the plane hit a ridge. The crash was violent. The fuel tanks burst open, and the plane caught fire. 3 men were killed in the impact and fire. The 6 other crew members survived, but were stranded in freezing temperatures with almost no supplies. They used parts of the wrecked plane to build a shelter and stretch their food and water. For nearly 2 weeks, they fought through extreme cold and waited to be found. After 13 days, a rescue team from the USS Pine Island spotted them and brought them home. Wilk Station Neptune. The Lockheed P-2V-7LP Neptune was a U.S. Navy aircraft designed for long-range patrol missions. This version was modified with special landing gear to operate on snow and ice, and it had jet-assisted takeoff rockets called JATO bottles attached to help it lift off in harsh conditions like those in Antarctica. On November 9, 1961, the plane was leaving Wilk Station in East Antarctica. It was headed toward McMurdo Station to continue its support of Operation Deep Freeze, a major U.S. mission that provided transportation and supplies for scientists studying the continent. On board were 9 people, including Dr. Edward Thiel, a geophysicist collecting important data for research. As the aircraft began its takeoff from the icy airstrip near Wilk Station, something went terribly wrong. A previous rough landing had damaged a 400-gallon internal fuel tank stored in the bomb bay. That tank had come loose and was leaking aviation fuel under the aircraft. As the plane accelerated and the crew fired the JATO rockets to help it lift off, the leaking fuel ignited. Flames quickly spread across the underside of the aircraft. The fire burned through the fiberglass at the tail section and filled the cockpit with thick smoke. The pilots couldn't see and had no way to stop the blaze. The plane lost control and crashed just beyond the runway. Out of the 9 people on board, 5 were killed instantly in the crash, including Dr. Thiel and 4 Navy crewmen. The other 4 survived. Investigators later confirmed that the fire started because of the fuel tank dislodging and spilling fuel near the rocket ignition. Chilean Air Force C-130 Hercules. On December 9, 2019, a Chilean Air Force C-130 Hercules aircraft took off from Punta Arenas in southern Chile. It was heading to King George Island in Antarctica. The purpose of the mission was to carry supplies, equipment, and personnel to a Chilean research base. Some of the people on board were traveling to inspect a floating fuel supply system and to perform routine maintenance work at the base. There were 38 people on board in total, 17 crew members and 21 passengers, which included both military and civilian personnel. About 1 hour and 18 minutes into the flight, the aircraft lost all radio contact. At that point, it was flying over the Drake Passage, a rough, unpredictable stretch of water between South America and Antarctica. The plane disappeared without sending a distress call. A large international search operation was launched right away. Countries like Argentina, Brazil, the United Kingdom, the United States, Uruguay, and Israel all joined the effort. After 3 days, search teams found floating debris and human remains about 17 miles from the plane's last known location. Unfortunately, there were no survivors. The aircraft itself was originally built in 1978 for the United States Marine Corps and was later upgraded and sold to Chile in 2015. It had been refurbished to meet C-130H standards. Investigators tried to determine the cause of the crash, but due to the deep ocean location, poor weather, and limited recovery of parts, the exact cause could not be determined. Experts said that unless more of the wreckage is recovered, the true reason for the crash may never be known. VXC-6 LC-130 Hercules. In 1975, a U.S. Navy LC-130 Hercules aircraft from Squadron VXC-6 was assigned to fly to Dome Charlie, a remote area deep within East Antarctica. The plane was on a mission to deliver scientists, equipment, and supplies to set up a research camp. The purpose of this mission was to help scientists study the ice sheet and drill deep ice cores to learn more about the Earth's climate history. These kind of flights were a regular part of Operation Deep Freeze, a long-running U.S. program that supports science work in Antarctica. The LC-130 was a special version of the Hercules plane. It had skis for landing on snow and rockets called JATO bottles, short for jet-assisted takeoff, mounted on the sides to help it lift off from soft or icy surfaces. But during takeoff at Dome Charlie, something went wrong. One of the JATO bottles broke loose and slammed into the plane's right wing. This damaged the wing and made it impossible to get airborne. The pilots quickly shut down the attempt and brought the plane to a stop on the ice. Thankfully, everyone on board survived without serious injuries. The crew built a small survival camp and waited for rescue. Another LC-130 was sent to help, but it also suffered damage during its own takeoff attempt when the front landing gear collapsed. For the next couple months, both aircraft were stuck in the snow. In the summers of 1975 and 1976, Navy teams managed to bring in new parts, wings, engines, and other gear, and fix both planes right there on the ice. They were eventually flown back to McMurdo Station and returned to duty. After the crash, experts reviewed the use of JATO bottles in these harsh conditions. They concluded that while the rockets helped with takeoffs, they also posed serious risk if they failed. Argentine Navy Neptune P-2H. The Argentine Navy used a Lockheed P-2H Neptune aircraft, which was a twin-engine patrol plane built for long-range missions over water. On September 15, 1976, this plane took off from Rio Grande Naval Air Base in southern Argentina. Its goal was to fly over parts of Antarctica, including the Drake Passage and the South Shetland Islands. The flight was meant to help guide an icebreaker ship, the Ara General San Martin, by checking ice conditions in the area. This was important for Argentina's Arctic research and military operations. There were 11 people on board, including 10 Navy personnel and a civilian cameraman from a television network. Sadly, the aircraft never made it back. While flying over Antarctica, it crashed into Mount Bernard on Livingston Island. The mountain rises sharply and is often covered in clouds and snow. Bad weather likely made it difficult for the crew to see clearly or avoid the terrain. The wreckage was found 8 days later by a search plane. All 11 people had died on impact. A few months later, in January 1977, the Argentine army sent a helicopter to try to recover the bodies. But during that mission, the helicopter also crashed due to dangerous weather, killing all 3 crew members. After that, recovery operations were stopped. In 2024, parts of the original plane were finally found by Bulgarian researchers on Livingston Island, which were handed back to Argentina. Cessna 404 Titan. The Cessna 404 Titan was a small twin-engine plane that came out in the mid-1970s. On December 31, 1985, a Chilean charter company called Linea Aérea Aeropetrol was flying it from Puerto Arenas, Chile. On board were 2 crew members and 8 American tourists. Their plan was to fly to King George Island for some sightseeing over Antarctica as part of their New Year's celebration. As the plane got close to landing at Teniente Rodolfo Marsh Airport, the weather started getting worse, with low visibility. The pilots first tried to head to another airbase, Marambio Station, but the weather there was just as bad. So they turned back and tried to land again at Teniente Marsh, even though the weather hadn't improved. While trying to land without proper visibility, they flew too low and crashed into a small hill just a few miles from the runway. The plane was destroyed and caught fire. Sadly, all 10 people on board died. Experts found that pilots made a dangerous decision by continuing to land when they couldn't see clearly. They were supposed to fly visually, but the weather was only safe for instrument flying. Because they didn't keep a safe altitude and couldn't see where they were going, the plane hit the ground while still under control. The crash was caused by poor judgment in bad weather and a lack of awareness about their surroundings. De Havilland DHC-6 Twin Otter 300. The aircraft was a twin otter with skis, made by de Havilland, Canada. It was operated by Ken Boric Air and registered as CGKBC. This flight was part of a logistics mission for Italy's Antarctic research team. The plane took off from Amundsen Scott South Pole Station and was headed to Zacelli Station near Terra Nova Bay. It was supposed to fly under visual flight rules, meaning the pilots needed clear weather to see where they were going. While climbing over rough mountainous terrain, the weather started getting worse. Even though they were flying under VFR, they accidentally flew into thick clouds where they couldn't see anything, a condition called instrument meteorological conditions. Sadly, while still flying under control, the plane crashed into the side of Mount Elizabeth at about 13,000 feet. The aircraft was completely destroyed, and all 3 Canadian crew members died. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada said this was a controlled flight into terrain accident, meaning the plane was working fine, but it hit the ground because the crew didn't realize how close they were to the mountain. Investigators found the aircraft was climbing at its maximum rate when it impacted the mountain. The crew had turned into an area covered by cloud before reaching clearer air, likely losing situational awareness. Although the aircraft had a TAWS unit, its terrain data didn't cover the area, so it couldn't provide warnings. However, the onboard GPS receivers had basic terrain alerting, and a warning may have prompted the crew's last-minute climb attempt. To make things worse, the cockpit voice recorder wasn't working, and there were no rules that required it to be checked before takeoff. Aviation IL-14 FKM. The plane involved was a ski-equipped Aviation IL-14, built around 1957 and operated by Aeroflot. It was part of the 24th Soviet Antarctic Expedition, helping move people and supplies between Antarctic research stations. On the day of the crash, it was flying from Molodosnaya Station to Mawson Station with 5 crew members and 9 passengers. Right after taking off from Molodosnaya's ice runway, the plane started to climb but only reached about 230 to 260 feet above the ground. Suddenly, it lost lift, rolled to the left, and crashed into a glacier about 0.6 miles from the runway. The aircraft broke apart on impact and was destroyed. Out of the 14 people on board, 3 crew members died, but the 11 other, including all the passengers, survived with injuries. Investigators found that strong wind shear and turbulence during the climb caused the crash. Wind shear is when the wind suddenly changes speed or direction, and it can throw an aircraft off balance, especially when flying low. In this case, the sudden shift in wind made the plane roll and drop uncontrollably. Experts say that in Antarctica, this kind of sudden wind is common and dangerous. For a heavy plane like this one, flying low with skis on, there's very little time to react. Even a normal-looking flight can turn deadly in seconds if the weather suddenly changes like it did here.